it seems to me through the through line through a lot of the discussions we've had on the Soapbox, it does seem to come down to, and this is not rocket science, but organization, coordination. And this is a point that, Ralph Nader has made, Adolph Reed Jr. recently made in his Harper's article, Nothing Left. But the left in this country has been successfully factionalized by its enemies, essentially. And so they're working at different ends and doing important work on small sectional pieces of our overall society, but there seems to lack a cohesive overall vision for a progressive future in this country. And I wonder, just recently we've begun to talk about the possibility of holding sort of a progressive conference here at USM for our community. And I think part of the idea behind that is to bring some of these currently disparate groups and organizations together and talk about messaging and outreach and unifying with some sort of broader vision. Do you have any ideas or suggestions as to what that should look like and how we should do that?
I mean, there's a basic psychological fact that, if present, really helps. And that is, we need each other. Everybody, human beings are social animals. We need each other. If children don't get personal attention, if they don't get talked to and sung to and looked at and held, they don't learn to develop. They don't develop. They're called failures to thrive. They don't learn to walk properly. They don't learn to talk properly. And it's very basic. We need each other. No ecological movement is going to win unless they get the support of all the other people that are interested in change. And of course, no one else who's trying to accomplish anything on this planet will accomplish it unless we have a planet here that functions. And so that I think what happened is that identity politics and a deliberate FBI and CIA effort was made to separate people out. And the area that I know the most about that is in the women's movement, as a founding mother who was active and saw a lot of this going. One of the things that happened at the beginning of our movement is we felt that because women really were at the bottom, a white woman got less than an African-American man in the wage system, and African-American women actually got as much as African-American men. So all women were, but all women were underpaid, that we felt if we at the bottom rise up, everyone will come with us. That was a little bit naive. And then also, and there's a very good book called The Great Wurlitzer that goes over this, and there have been many articles. Anybody could look them up. Gloria Steinem was a paid CIA agent, and they invested hundreds of millions of dollars into creating a gender-only movement so that the class element was expunged, as they did in the African-American liberation movement, made sure through their investments that it was a race-only movement. And to do that means once you divide people from each other, they can't win. The mass of people, if you repress class, that we're all together because we all need to get ahead and this is an unfair system, then you're not going to have the kind of connections that we need. So we would have to say, look at class, 1%, 99%, an awful lot of us, and we need each other because what we have is numbers. And to emphasize that those factions and those forces that pushed us apart were trying to change the basic idea of equality. And if we want equality, we have to include everyone. There are all sorts of articles, if anybody wants to look up Gloria Steinem, CIA. It came out in 1969 in Ramparts. There was a recent article in Bloomberg News, what did Gloria Steinem and Henry Kissinger have in common? CIA pay. But that was very successful. I remember as a young woman, Ms. Magazine coming out, and I thought, wow, such a glossy magazine and no ads. Isn't that great? I didn't think of, where'd they get the money? No. And so that there was a combination of enormous naivete and powerful CIA and FBI interests pushing us apart. And we have to understand that history and not fall for that again, because that divides and destroys people. We need each other. All the mass of people have is the fact that we're the mass of people. And splintered, we won't win.
Well, that's another recurring theme on the Soapbox. We talk often about how these lines of political demarcation that currently exist are sort of arbitrary and inaccurate. And ultimately, there's the wealthy sort of plutocratic few, and then there's everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
And the more we allow ourselves to be divided, then the more we allow ourselves to be conquered.
That's right.
And so we talk often about the importance of solidarity, and I was interested in hearing what you have to say, because something else I've often mentioned is sort of the importance of caring for one another, and the importance, as cheesy as it sounds, of loving one another and caring about the well-being of our neighbors and friends and family members and perfect strangers, but caring about their lot in life and wanting to do something to help them, with the understanding that if we create that as a cultural value, then we too will be cared for by our communities and friends and family. And so maybe we can conclude on this note, but does that sound like sentimental hogwash to you, or is that an important sort of cultural moral that we could build on?
I think it sounds like both, because in the capitalist system, if you just are kind to people, you're a sucker. And there is that play by Bertolt Brecht, Good Woman of Szechuan, who took in all the beggars, and then after a while they would take advantage of her so much that her mean uncle would have to come and kick them out. And the moral was you have to be both in this system. And I think you can't have an attitude of charity towards other people. You have to have an attitude, we need each other. We need to join together. We need each other. Because otherwise we're all reduced in value, so that it doesn't have these elements of charity, but much more need and affirmation of one another, which is more respectful and less gets into the kind of charity that makes you look like a sucker. And that's one of the victories of capitalism, to make people feel that if they're altruistic, they'll be taken advantage of, and in fact create an atmosphere in which that often is the case.
That's such an interesting distinction. I hadn't really thought about that. But if you listen to, say, your Glenn Becks and even some libertarians, they laud charity as the solution. But there's something sort of inherently subjugating about charity, isn't there? There's a victimization that you're perpetuating.
Oh, you poor wretch, here's a quarter. No, it's I need you. And if the person that you need isn't going to respond and want to give and join, then you can't unite with them. Because it's I need you. Be here with me. I'll help you, you help me, you help the thing we believe together. And if you're not willing and you're just taking, sorry. So that it's a need of us all to make it together, to work together, rather than you should help the poor wretch on the corner, who will, in the United States, often just be looking to steal your wallet. We have to face that.
Mm-hmm.
We can't get too sentimental here.
Right. So perhaps solidarity as a value over charity.
Charity. Solidarity over charity, absolutely. And demand of all of us to participate and help.
How about this for a final question? How do we begin to move, and we've kind of touched a little bit on this, but I wanted to ask you directly, how do we begin to move people away from this apathetic disengagement from everything that affects them? I mean, particularly working people, the working poor, the people who are most adversely affected by the system as it currently exists, are pretty effectively disengaged from the process. How do we get to those people and motivate them and unite them and forge these bonds of solidarity and begin to do something?
Well, I think by beginning to organize around local issues that affect people and then having people go and talk to those people. When, I was in the American Independent Movement, which was a movement for democracy and against the war in Vietnam way back when in Connecticut, we went door to door talking to people. And of course, now as an older woman, I could go door to door. People wouldn't be so scared of me probably. But I find from talking to people on the subway in New York where I live, just talking as much as we can and setting up efforts around things that people care about and getting our message across that way, as well as through whatever airwaves we can, through speaking, through the internet, where there are wonderful sources, whether they're Portside or Truth Out or Truth Dig or whatever. The internet is a wonderful place to reach people, and particularly getting to young people who are far more open to change because they see ahead of them disaster. Their opportunities are so truncated. The America that I faced was a land of opportunity. When I got out of graduate school, I had lots of jobs. I may not have had the perfect job for me, but the idea that I wouldn't get a job was unthinkable. And this is what young people are facing now on all education levels, even though it's worse for the least educated. And so that I think we have to address people where they are with this message and, on the airwaves as much as we can. And I think that will really help, because building awareness that we're here for each other and that we are a power, that they can't function without us, and that we're the engine of change. We don't have to, the 99% don't have to sit there while the 1% herds us into oblivion and destruction. We do have a say, but it's only going to happen together because we need each other. It's very important. And people are worried. They're worried about their kids. They're worried about education. They're worried about jobs. They're worried about their marriages, which are decomposing. They're worried about the fact that there is precarity everywhere, whether it's in your personal life or your political life or your economic life. Everything is shaking and precarious, and that we need the solidarity and the stability of knowing that we are there for one another in building a change, not just in doing good works for each other, which can exhaust one another, taking care of each other's house and garden or something, but to create something together. That's the way I think it'll happen. And when it's ready, which I hear the rumbling, it's going to be ready. People are almost there. We just need to help it come to life. That's what I think.